Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Author's Cut Live. I am Tabitha Lord from Book Club Babel, and I am so pleased to welcome Heather Rigney tonight. Before we begin, let me just give you a few housekeeping notes. If you have joined us on the live chat, if you've registered for this event tonight and you hover over the little chat feature at the bottom of your screen, you can click and send us some questions, and I will be sure to forward them to Heather during the course of our interview this evening. We are streaming live on Facebook. Will be posted to YouTube by tomorrow, and this interview will also be posted to the Book Club Babel website tomorrow. End of housekeeping. All right, well, Heather, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on our show. We had a few technical difficulties, so if we start drinking really early, don't mind us. And also my disclaimer to all of our viewers, Heather and I are friends, and we hang out a lot together, so I plan on asking her some fun questions and making us all laugh a little bit tonight. So that's my disclaimer. So Heather, welcome, and congratulations on the release of your third and final installment in the Marrow trilogy. And can you just tell us a little bit about, I did post your interview and I've had you before on Book Club Babel, so I think some of our readers probably know a little bit about your story, but can you give us a little bit of an overview on your Marrow trilogy?
Sure. So it is, this is so weird. I've never
Isn't it though? It's so fun though.
Very fun.
Hi. We just keep waving at each other.
So it's, my mind is going blank. It takes place in Patuxent Village, which is in Rhode Island, and we are right on Narragansett Bay. And it starts with our narrator, who is an alcoholic funeral director mother, and she's just failing at life, and she is nursing a hangover in the local playground when this beautiful woman walks in, and she starts to hear voices in her head, and she thinks maybe it's the booze, but it's not, and it turns out to be a mermaid. An evil mermaid who's been living in the bay for centuries, and it kind of goes from there. Then Evie starts to do her detective work to figure out what's going on, and that blows up in her face, and no one believes her because she's an alcoholic. And then you hear the backstory, find out the backstory of the mermaids. And the first book is all about how this mermaid is just torturing poor Evie, and Evie's trying to figure things out. The second book goes more into the history of the mermaids and how they arrived in Rhode Island, and a lot of mermaid lore from around the world. And then the third book is kind of, in the second book, the mermaid and Nomia and Evie realize they need to join forces to save their siblings. And in the third book, it's kind of the wrap up of everything, and battling siblings and family, and yeah, it all comes together.
It's a great series. I loved it. I fell in love with the very first book a couple of years ago, and I was so excited, and especially because I live in Rhode Island too, so I've been to those places that you feature. How prominent a role did the sense of place, like you live in Patuxent Village, how did that inspire you with these books?
Sure. So the book started out as a short story, and I wrote it as like a new mom, because I had changed jobs and moved within Patuxent Village. So I moved from one house to another in Patuxent Village, but I was like a new role. I had stopped teaching. So I identified with the narrator. And she was so boring when I wrote her. So she was just this mom that lived in Patuxent Village and just kind of wandered around and then stumbles on a mermaid. And it really wasn't that interesting. So then I thought it would be funny to give her some quirky nature and make her an alcoholic and make her a funeral director, because there's a funeral home right down the street from my home. So there's a lot of familiar things. Like all the scenes take place around where I live, and anything that I didn't go to, like Prudence Island, I've been to Prudence Island where I stepped off the ferry and then got back on again. The rest was all done through like Google Maps and things like that.
That's excellent. And I think you did a lot of research for this too.
Yeah. Yes.
And so talk a little bit about that. I love hearing you talk about sitting in the museums and reading the ship's logs, and that's so cool. So, I mean, and honestly, when you're writing a fantasy story but you're starting in the real world, you have to, we talk about this a lot on our world building panels, but you have to bring a reader along so it doesn't feel jarring and it doesn't feel, sudden that all of a sudden there's magic and all of a sudden there's mermaids. But you did, one of the ways you say that you do that is through this really well-researched history that you take on all of your, that you go into detail with the history. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I find it fascinating. And again, I live here too, so
Right.
it's all of our history. But go ahead.
So yeah, it was fun. So I did a lot of research. I went to the Warwick Historical Society, which is on Harrison Street, and not it's just outside Patuxent Village, and it's an old house. It's right on a cemetery, and there's these people that meet there, and they've been meeting there for a long time. One of the Mr. Brown goes there all the time, and he is one of the Browns, and he is wonderful to speak to. And I just went through the newspapers, just looking for random things, and they go back like it's about a century, and there was just wonderful stories there. So I spent a lot of time doing research about the village. I also spent a whole afternoon. I booked it in advance to go to the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and I spent the whole afternoon. It was like an icy, rainy February day, and I spent the whole day reading a ship's log. It was wonderful.
It's so cool because it just adds that authenticity, when, even if you only sprinkle these little tidbits in it, it gives it such a richness, and you can feel that in the stories. And you also did research on, aquatic animals,
Yes.
right? So,
Lots and lots. And yeah, I almost had like a nervous breakdown researching. It's called a vodnik. It's a Czechoslovakian water creature, and they look like frogmen, and they're usually found near mills. And I really wanted to find like a place where I was trying to get one character moving to another area, and I was looking at these maps, and I was trying to figure it out, like, is there a mill, and is there an old mill, and is there a haunted mill? And then there was like rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and my head almost exploded. I was in Wildflower in Providence, and it's at the end of the second book I wrote about how like I just started screaming and then ended up leaving.
it does happen, in the process.
What am I doing? Why?
I've gone down too many rabbit holes. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about that a little bit. So first of all, when you started the first book, did you know it was going to be a series? Did you know you had too much for one book, or I know when I started mine, I thought I had one book, and that was only when I started writing that I was like, there's more here. And then I divided up. Did you know that it was going to be more than one book?
I would love to say that, yeah, I had a big plan, but I didn't. No, it was awful. Like I get to the end, and everyone's like, you should keep going. And I was like, yeah, I should keep going.
Yeah, I should keep going. I don't know where, but I should. So obviously there were some moments of panic when you really didn't know where you're going. So I think it's interesting, and I think readers enjoy hearing this from writers because, we're human, and it's a process, and it's an art form. And so there are no rules. So tell us about some of your favorite awful moments.
Awful. Other than the Wildflower one was probably the biggest.
That's a big one.
That was a total like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. And then after that was like a downward spiral. And I have a really good friend, and I talked to her. She's a project manager in Worcester, and she said, okay, like as your friend and as a project manager, until you need to back off, like just stop working on book 2 and take a couple months off. And I did. And that was really healthy to stop and regroup and figure out where I was going with everything.
So the distance was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know this about you because we've talked about it. So in the writing world, there are 2 types of us. There are the plotters who like to outline and who like to, at least basically know, okay, I'm starting here. I'd like to end here. Here are the major plot tangles. Here's my character. And then you put them through their paces. And it doesn't always turn out how you think, but have a sense. And then there are the pantsers. Fly by the seat of their pants writers, and you fall into that category. And I have a panic attack even thinking about that. So, but yet you get to the end, yet the creative process happens for you. So can you talk a little bit about like when that magic happens and what it feels like, and how you're onto the right, trajectory or whatever?
So I use Scrivener, and when I start writing, I approach writing the same way I approach painting, which is you get you never know what you're going to get. Like you just kind of, you just start and then you see where the muse takes you and you see what unfolds as you put things down and where you're going. You get like a rough idea. Like I knew I wanted to make a mermaid book. So I knew that was the angle.
Right.
So as long as I had mermaids in it, I was golden. So but no, and I had like, I'd have like images or scenes or thoughts or conversations in my head, and I would just make these little notes in places. And then it was almost like putting it together a puzzle, but you're only handed like 6 or 7 pieces at a time. And then you kind of like move them around. And then slowly like the picture starts to snap into place and things start to snap in as you go forward. And Scrivener is great for moving things like that. That blew my mind when I opened that writing program, because I was using Word before that and I couldn't shuffle anything. So that with having that, and then I started color coding so I could see. That helped so much. That was amazing. I found that through Instagram. Somebody else had posted a picture of their binder, which is like this little like sidebar when you're writing, and it's like it's got all the characters like all going down. You can do by their story arcs. So I would write by character and just see where they were going and see what they said they wanted to do. And I would just kind of follow them. And then I would jump to another character and see where they were going. And then connections would start to make place. And then I'd have an idea. I kind of knew by the third book, I definitely started the third book knowing where I wanted to end. I actually wrote, let's see, how did it go? I remember it was June after I finished the second book, I wrote the last chapter, like before I even wrote the final book. And it didn't really change that much. I mean, I did edit it a little bit, but it didn't change that much by the time.
Where you wanted it to end.
Yeah. So like a year and a half out, I wrote the last chapter, which was a big deal for me. I was like,
that's sort of soothing though. At least, you know, I got to get there somehow. That's a good ending. I gotta find my way there. Come on, characters, let's go.
I think going forward, I would try that again. Like write the last chapter and then know that that's my goal and kind of.
And you started off this answer saying, you know, just like with my artwork. So perhaps people don't know that you are actually a lovely artist and an art teacher. So can you talk a little bit about how maybe the two things feed your soul or differently, and, you know, and your processes, how they might be the same or different. And then you know what, I don't have the book next to me. Do you have yours with you?
Yeah, I do. It's over there.
Okay. Because I meant to have it to show, but my husband has it upstairs, and he's, because I had you sign it over to him. So he's eagerly got it in his hands, and I forgot to grab it. But you did your own cover art, which is the whole point of this.
Screen for 1 second.
Okay. Okay. She'll be right back because she's a beautiful artist, and she did the cover art to all her books. And they are just stunning, actually. So there's Caging the Mirror, the last one. So, yay. So can you talk a little bit about your work as an art teacher, how your, you know, that different kind of art maybe feeds your writing and vice versa?
Yeah.
If it does.
They do. They balance. Like when I first started writing, I would have ideas for paintings. And then when I was painting more, I haven't painted in a while because the writing became all consuming. But when I first started writing, when I wrote, I'd think of an idea of something I wanted to paint. So I would put it down and I'd go paint. And then while I was painting, I would have ideas for my writing, and they would kind of feed one another. It was this like really nice balance going back and forth. And then I haven't done as much artwork. I've just been so busy.
Yeah. Well, you've been teaching artwork.
Yeah. I've been teaching, which has been wonderful. So I started teaching again in September, and it's great. I'm so happy. I had my half year review today, and it was glowing, and they're happy with me, and I'm happy. It's a big happy fest. So
that's great.
Everything is good. Yeah. I love teaching. I didn't think I would enjoy teaching younger grades. So I teach grades 1 through 5. And I thought that would be challenging, but it's not. It's wonderful.
Inspiring.
Yes.
Well, they're so open at that age, you know?
They are. Yeah. I had another teacher tell me that that my class was magical. I'm like, oh, that's
that's lovely. That's lovely. Okay. So let's go back to the books, because in book 3, which is the one we sort of featured on Book Club Babble this week, you created this place called is it the
Semlong? Yes.
Oh, my God. And it's this creepy, wild place where there's this collection of oddities, really. Where did you get the idea for that? And because I have to say, in the darkest, creepiest of ways, that's sort of like my favorite thing about book 3.
Really?
It's this
That's great.
place that's so, because it adds the creep factor, and it adds the tension, and it kind of ups the game, because there's this collection of these really rare, creatures, and then there's these people that are paying to come in. So talk a little bit about that, because that's sort of I don't know, again, the creep factor was really high, and it added, it upped the ante in the book, I thought, by that whole creation of that space.
So actually, when I finished book 1 and I was thinking about book 2, I wanted to have like a collection, and I called it the collection. And then at that time, Guardians of the Galaxy came out. So there's a collector in that. And I was like, I can't call it the collection anymore. I have a collector, because it's not going to work. So I changed it. So Sammlung is actually German for collection. So
there you go. Just switch languages. It works every time. It's a writerly trick.
Hide it right in their layers. And so that's what I did. And then so I really wanted to have something where I thought, like, what's the worst thing? What's the worst thing?
Right.
Well, people that have too much money, like, the elite, like the crazy rich Asian thing, like where there's like, they are the 1% of the 1%.
Right.
Like when you get into that part of life or society, like there are no more rules, and they live by an entirely different code. And if money is not an option, then what would you do? Like what,
right.
Would you still have a moral compass or not? And if you didn't, if you didn't have a moral compass, where would you end up? So I figured, like, if you had a playground and you could get anything you want in this playground, you didn't have to think about it. You just show up and you can have whatever you want, do whatever you want, and have access to things. And it would just be like a buffet of, whatever oddities and things like that. That would be wonderfully corrupt and awful. And
it was. And then you add the supernatural, like you add this mystical, magical, that there are creatures, that there are these odd, things that you could collect. And it just created it was really, really well done. And there wasn't really much of an inkling of that in the other books. So that was uniquely, your third book had this, we've got the big bads doing big bad things with these kind of innocent creatures. And that was a great plot.
Thank you.
Plot thingy.
Thank you.
So as a writer, what was your most, what was your favorite review that you've ever gotten? And then what is the worst, most difficult criticism that you've ever, because I'll say mine, because it's on Goodreads. It's on, I think I've said it, but just so, we level the playing field here and nobody feels weird. So someone wrote one time about one of my books, it's as boring as a bowl of tepid oatmeal. And I thought, wow, all right, I'm just going to delete and not look at that. So anyway, it's just kind of fun to think about, like, what has somebody said about your work that has really inspired you and really made you say, this is why I keep going? And then what's the one that you're like, oh no, stop it?
Yeah. Well, I have like two really inspiring ones. One, so Nicole Hill, she wrote, I think I have it. Yes. So Nicole Hill's like right there on the back.
Right there. Yep. Barnes and Noble book blog.
Yeah. I put it on my bookmark, and she summed it up so well. She said, what's great about Rigney's Horrific, that's horror-filled and terrific, hysterical debut novel. Besides the bloodthirsty merfolk, our anti-hero protagonist is an overweight, drunk, subpar mother who also happens to be a funeral director. I can't even describe the premise of this book without getting giddy, because how many times does a plot involve both vicious mermaids and Rhode Island colonists? And that was perfect. Like she did a better job of summing up my book than I did. So I love, thank you, Nicole, wherever you are in Texas.
It's a good one. It's perfect, because it is. It's just, you've got this protagonist that's sort of like the anti-hero, but you love her. I mean, I loved her from the minute I met her in the first book. I'm like, oh my God, she's the insecurity in all of us. She's us at our worst, yet relatable and lovable and rises to the occasion. And then you've got these creatures, and you just sort of took the mermaid, I mean, I think people think of mermaids as the creatures that lured sailors, but mostly they think of, Ariel. And you gave it quite a different, edge.
loyalty.
Yeah, which is super fun. All right, so what's your did you have one more good one?
Yeah, there's actually one more review that was just absolutely amazing. There was a woman contacted me from Europe, and another author that Susie Turner, that I've become friends with through social media, and she gave my book to a friend of hers who had lost her son. He died unexpectedly, very young, and she was in a rut and very upset, and she received my book for, I think, for Christmas, and she read it, and then she wrote to me and she thanked me. She said, I haven't been able to read since my son died, and Susie recommended the book, and I picked it up, and you made me laugh, and it was the first time I've laughed in a year, or a significant amount of time, and I was like, even now I'm like, oh.
Tearing up, yeah, like
yeah, it was like the first letter,
power
like,
of our words, yeah.
oh, like I did not expect my work. It's a mermaid book. Like I didn't expect that to make anyone, you know, emote in that way. Like that was not ever my intention. I was so glad that I could have been that light in the darkness for her. That Evie was that light in the dark. She just loved Evie. So
who doesn't love Evie? You gotta love Evie.
Well, people don't. So that would take me to my.
That's interesting. Okay, so that takes you to your bad review.
Yeah. So yeah, one of them was, I think the worst one, like, was similar to yours. It's just one word: boring. Like.
And of all the things you could say about your book, boring is not one of them.
Yeah.
I just, so you say, okay, well, people are entitled to their opinion, as wrong as they may be. No. But that is
when I saw it, I was like screaming at my screen, like, no, you're boring. No, you're boring. Like,
I know.
What do you know?
Yeah, exactly. You write a book and then we'll see what you think about boring.
Right, exactly. Like, yeah. So then, and then there was others there. People are just hated Evie, just hate her. Like, just don't, like, just think she's whiny, think that she's just a terrible role model, and that.
Well, I mean, there are moments where you kind of want to smack her.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the fun, you know.
Right.
I mean, that's sort of part of the lovableness about her, is you do want to shake her occasionally, but it makes her human, you know, and it makes her relatable and not a perfect, you know, character. So when she does the right thing and when she does come through, you know what it took for her to get there, and it's sort of like that really good character development piece that we all want to have for our stories. But sorry, I know that was but it's like my favorite question. Somebody asked me once in an interview, and I'm like, I ask everyone, what's your first review? Because I don't know, makes me feel better.
1 star, boring. Yeah,
well, you gotta laugh about that, you know. I mean, what are you gonna do, right? Cry? No. Well, no. Yes, in the beginning, but not anymore.
Yell at the screen.
I know, right?
You can't go after them. You can't troll a troll.
Nope, you can't troll the trolls. Nope, you certainly can't. Okay, so you're working on a new project, and this is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's I would not say actively working. Like, I think about it a lot right now. I'm
swirling. It's in there.
It's been swirling for probably 9 years, so it's a long time, and I want to spend some time with it and go back and see what's going on. So this is my book that has tones of infertility, it has tones of teenage pregnancy, and it also has this fairy tale myth that I'm kind of weaving through it, that's a woman that turns into a crow.
Okay, and so it has the fantastical, like the Marrow series, but it has a bit.
This is different though. So this the way that I've woven the fairy tale in is, so it's a mother who went through infertility before she had her child, and then the child's now a teenager, but the child is pregnant. So it's like, how do you deal?
Right. You want a child
so
so badly, and then someone who's not, you know,
who has accidentally gets pregnant, and then.
So how is it writing something so more real? Because obviously you are not an alcoholic funeral director who knows mermaids. So that was, you know, I mean, you may have, we always draw something of ourselves into the characters, but this is a bit more real. How is it going from the really fantastical to something a little bit more, you know, women's fiction, you know, or.
Well, it's kind of how I started writing, was because I did go through infertility it was 4 years. It was really long. And I wrote and journaled through the whole thing. I wrote poetry, and it's what got me through it. Was my writing kept me sane. So I saved all of that. So I have all of that voice to kind of draw from. I didn't get pregnant in high school, so I can't really draw from that. No. But I have met a lot of women that were pregnant as teenagers. So I'm pulling from that. And then the fairy tale aspect was just so fun to write. And that's more or less the way that the mother and daughter are communicating is through this fairy tale that the mother told the daughter. And that's how they're talking, because they're not really talking right now. So the book kind of takes place over like just a few days. But this fairy tale is something that at night they can't talk about what's happening, and this is how it's like a fable, which is the point of fairy tales. It's just a way of talking about things that you can't really talk about, which is so great.
So you are going to finish this book, right?
Yes, I need to. I really do. I need to. I mean, I'm like nervous about looking at it because it's so.
Well, you've been away from it for a while, so then you get it gets scary, you know.
Yeah, I may have to just start all over again, and that's fine.
But you have the bones, so that's
exactly.
Got the bones. Okay,
yeah, so I'm gonna plan it this time too.
No.
Yeah, it'd be crazy. Why not?
No. Okay, so one more question because we're short on time now. So I just want to talk a little bit about how you feel like you've changed from writing the first book to writing the last book, and you know, was the experience very different writing the debut novel and versus writing the third one in a series? Was it, you know, how did you grow as a writer? How did the experience change? Let's talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
So I'm a much better writer, I think, than when I first started. Just like, paragraph structure and finding my voice, and my style has like been polished and honed by the people that I've worked with. So, I mean, I didn't used to pay money when I was just writing journal entries. Like, I didn't pay anyone to be like, oh, that period really doesn't belong there. Oh, you should consider a semicolon. Like, so I have that knowledge now from all the people that I've been so blessed to work with. Right. So that's improved a lot.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think my work habits are great now. My writing habits, like I know what I need to do to get the job done. And it's so similar to running. Like you start off with like a short story, which is your 5K, and then
right.
like you just keep working at it till you get to that marathon, and then you do one marathon, a book, and then you do another one, and then another one. So then right. You rack up all these long things because they're long, and it takes a lot of preparation. It's so like, you and I have talked about this, how exhilarating it is to finish a short story. I'm like, woo!
Yes, satisfying. And I did. Limited. It didn't take a whole year. It took like 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's so satisfying compared to, it's just a quick thing. It's like getting a PR on a 5K. Like, well, there, we can just knock that out, and it only took me an hour. Like,
yeah, exactly.
The 3-hour, year-long marathon of a book. So,
but you have the chops now.
Yes, and that's another thing. Like, I still like the indie thing is hard. Like when people say, "Oh, like who's your publisher?" and you're like, me. Right. And then you expect that, like, and it's like, no, I have people.
Yeah, I have people, lots of good people. They have editors and copy editors, and
it's not put together with staples or on a velo binder. Like,
no, it's a real deal. Yeah, but it is a lot of work. I mean, and that is the thing that people don't. Even traditionally published authors have to take responsibility for so much of what they do in terms of getting the word out, and just you have to advocate for yourself because no one else is going to. And I think that's true now almost across the board, unless you're Stephen King or whatever, like you have to advocate. So, and that's tricky because we tend to be people that want to, sit and write and create and do the thing. And then it's requiring different skills, muscle stretching in different ways.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I'm very excited about your latest project, and I'm going to keep your feet to the fire. Make sure you finish it. I'm just kidding. You finish it if you want to, but I'll tell you what, I'll read it. And so just circling back to the books one last time, I'm just going to plug them to anybody that's listening tonight. They are just some of my favorite stories. I love reading them. I blasted through them. Like in 1 or 2 sittings, because I read one on an airplane. and it was a cross-country flight, and I was like, wait, we can't land yet because I have 10 more pages. And my mom read them, and my husband read them, and my friends read them, and both my book clubs read them. And so they really just, your voice reaches people. It's edgy, it's funny, and it's a little gory. So it's just got something for everyone. So I highly recommend the Marrow trilogy by Heather Rigney. And it was a pleasure to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. And again, this will be streaming on Facebook, and we'll be posting up to YouTube, and it'll be living on our site tomorrow on Book Club Babble. So everyone, thank you for joining us, and have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.